we're back talking executive coaching, and we've talked a little bit about what executive coaching is in some previous episodes. So apologies if we go over some old ground a little bit, but I just think we need to know a little bit more about executive coaching. I mean, I think one of the first things I wanted to ask, is there much of a club? Is there much of a fellowship of executive coaches?
Not that I know of. There probably are a couple of them, but everyone is studiously avoiding inviting me to join them. There's the International Association of Executive Coaches, and I think that gives out some sort of qualification that no one really bothers with.
Right.
But it allows people to sit around and contribute somewhere along the line.
Okay.
There's an association in Australia, but over the years, people have tried to create organisations that will certify coaches.
Mm-hmm.
So that you can say, I've been through the course and I've been certified as a grade 1 coach, hope to be a grade 2 coach in a year's time, which probably would have been okay, but it's never really gotten off the ground. So the barriers to entry are quite low. The barrier to entry used to be having to go up to Officeworks and getting a business card with your name and the name of the executive coach on it.
Yep.
And of course, no one uses business cards anymore, so the barriers to entry have completely disappeared.
Well, it's writing it on your LinkedIn profile now.
Absolutely. You just take the wrong turn in Myers and end up in the executive coaching section. and so that's about it. So the world of executive coaching is filled with people who couldn't find anything else to do, have been executives at some stage and thought that they would just come in and help at fee. So it really does drain the professionalism. There are, of course, some elite executive coaches who are really just born for the job, who understand power at the top end, who love the idea of being able to challenge people. And it used to be that they loved the idea of following models in order to coach. So back in 1970, I think, a fellow designed the original coaching model of the GROW model, which was GROW, which was goals. I want to be a cross-country runner. Reality, I'm 2.5 stone overweight. O was the options, lose weight and start running. And W was, what will we talk about next week?
Right.
And so that was the GROW model. And you could use that again and again as a coach. And it made you look as though and sound like you knew what you were doing. And then the consultants got involved, and of course the models became much more complicated, and the focus became on leadership itself. That was fine for a little while until the coaches became a little bit confused by the number of different models, and the HR departments became even more confused by the number of different models.
Right.
My irritation, though, is we've forgotten the history of executive coaching.
Oh, okay.
Because executive coaching goes right back in history.
Right.
I like to think that there is a golden thread, which if I throw high enough and far enough, lands just at the feet of Merlin in the days of King Arthur. Merlin, I like to think of as the first executive coach. Stands behind the king, advises the king. But there are all sorts of other ones. Jethro was the name of the father-in-law of Moses.
Right.
And he coached Moses as Moses is taking 100,000 people out of Egypt.
Don't part the sea like that. Part it this way.
Yes, that's right. What do you think? Don't part it. Divide it into squares. Then there was Nathan, who was oddly named as the coach for King David. Now, Nathan, I don't know what his relationship to King David was, but King David had sort of fallen off his perch by murdering someone, which had something to do with the fact that David had been having extramarital affairs with Queen Bathsheba, or whatever her name was. And at some stage, Nathan started telling King David a story about a man who had come into a village with just one lamb, one ewe, and a very rich man who was already in the village, in the township, stole the ewe and sacrificed the ewe. which was apparently all terrible. And David jumped up and down and said, "That's the most dreadful story. What a traitorous individual. If I knew who that was, I'd lop his head off," or whatever they did in those days. Nathan, though, drawing all his executive coaching skills to the top, said, "That man is you."
Right.
And it is said that David fell to his knees, sobbing, because he realised that that was a piece of coaching that was true.
Huh. There you go.
So there you had. Thomas More was said to be the coach for Henry VIII.
Right.
During the time that Henry VIII was trying to get the Vatican to annul his marriage so he could get married again. The only difference was that Thomas More didn't say very much, except that I'm holding my conscience.
Yes.
And Henry VIII didn't say very much, except was, I want someone who can give me a son.
I wonder how much Thomas More wants to take credit for a lot of the actions.
Apparently he's a very humble man, particularly after they took his head off.
Well, yes.
But there was this great play called Man for All Seasons, which I have always loved, absolutely always loved. And in the play, the narrator is called the common man.
Right.
And the common man takes the audience through the play. And the common man identifies himself as the same as everybody else. So Thomas More was the man with the conscience.
Right.
And at the end of the play, the common man says to the audience, "If we meet each other, recognise." And the message was that the majority of people are the common, comfortable person who just wants to stay out of trouble, wants to keep comfortable throughout their lives. Thomas More was the person who was going to stand up as a matter of conscience. And executive coaches look for those sorts of people as clients, the men and women of conscience. And that's becoming more and more relevant, I think, today. As the models of coaching disappear, the new coaches, or the new coaching challenge is, where do we find the men and women of conscience? The men and women who can say, well, in this world, we need truth. And we need to have the courage to execute the truth we find. But that's probably too late.
Well, see, I was starting to think that maybe it was a bit lonely being an executive coach, and because I was thinking about, do you have many contemporaries you share ideas with now? But really, your contemporaries stretch back through the ages, by the sounds of things. Well, that's not what a contemporary is, but yeah, it's fellow coaches.
Absolutely. I think there are groups of coaches massed together and call themselves sort of a company of coaches. There are groups, you just find them on the website, where there are photographs of 30 people who sometimes are coaches and mentors. But the majority of coaches are individuals who are trying to eke out a living on their own.
Yeah.
And that, which all sounds terribly romantic. It's not. It's a terrible place to be. The only good thing is when something beautiful, the magic happens in coaching, and then it makes all the difference.
And then you don't have anyone to share it with who knows your craft.
Well, you see, that's the thing about coaching. It's confidential.
Yes.
And that's why I like the history, because there has been no book ever written by any of these coaches about how they've done things.
Because anything interesting will give too much away.
Yes, that's right. So, and even now, the coaches that write books are giving away what everyone's already knows. It's a very solitary area, and I've always held very tight to the confidentiality. So I don't talk too much about what coaching is all about. I'll talk about it broadly. I'll talk in generality about stuff, but I don't say, I was coaching Joe Blow, who was the head of something or other.
No, and we don't really want to know specifics about people or clients particularly. I think it's more an examination of personality, really, of people in the executive classes and who are leaders.
If you start reading, particularly in the last couple of years, the AFR, I think there is a real curiosity about the behaviours and motives of senior executives.
Mm.
There is an attraction to find out why they did it. There's an attraction to find out how they did it. There's an attraction to find out, well, what are they doing now that they were caught doing it?
Mm.
So I think there is that attraction, but it's not an attraction of CEO skills. It's an attraction of what happened to the personality. Because to some degree there is this cult of personality with CEOs, particularly the ones listed, the banks, the companies that people are fascinated by because there's someone who did something very clever and made a lot of money. So there is still that interest in the person, but not necessarily on just how they did it.
Hmm. So you've told us a little bit about how you got into executive coaching. You were doing an MBA and you got asked, had you ever considered this thing? But is there a particular moment when you suddenly went, God, I'm good at this. This is the right thing for me. Can you remember that at all?
Yes, I think it was. There was a little bit of a sense of it. I'd done a little bit of executive coaching when I was employed by a time management company, and they'd sent me out to various companies to talk about time management. So there was a little bit there. But when I went to an organisation who gave me a business development person, and I didn't have to do that at all I had to do was coaching, I started realising the time I was spending with clients was really clearly valuable to them. And I would be having conversations with them and asking questions about stuff that I didn't really know all that much about.
Mm.
But it was leading them to conclusions that they had never arrived at before. So those coaches who say that they need to be in a particular specialist area, I think are missing opportunities. If you're a good coach, it doesn't matter where in the market you are. You don't need to know how a meat processing company works. You don't need to know about how the Secret Service operates.
Mm.
You just need to be able to challenge the individual. And in fact, probably the less you know about the market that you're in, the better. I remember being sent to the United States to coach on a program, and it was early in the this thing went on and off for about 7 years. But I proudly bought myself a book, and it wasn't quite the Dummy's Guide to Banking, but it was something like an introduction to banking.
Yeah.
And the CEO of the company wandered past me from the first class through the business class and stopped and said, "What are you reading, Peter?" And I said, "Oh, book on banking." And he took it away from me, gave it to the stewardess and said, "Make sure he doesn't get this back."
Is there a way to fling this out of the plane?
Yes, that's right. He said, "Make sure that Peter doesn't get it back," because he said, "Peter, I didn't employ you as a banker.
Yeah.
I employed you as a coach. So I'd rather you reading something about coaching or something else for all that matter." That was a very good piece of advice.
Yeah, it sounds like you get presented with a problem and the skill is pointing to what they haven't thought of about the problem, basically.
Asking questions that allows them to think outside the routine of the way they've taught themselves to think.
Mm.
If you're coaching at the senior level, you're talking about people who have spent years and years, sometimes decades, honing their thinking on one particular area, whether it be operations, whether it be finance, whatever. And so they've also honed their ability to take a problem and solve it really quickly. What they don't do is take a rest at the end of every year and say, hold on, let me challenge all the assumptions I've been using and see if they're still relevant. What they don't do is say, well, is there a better way of thinking about this? Or are people thinking about this better? They normally give that to somebody else to do who wanders away and nobody ever talks to them again. And that's where coaching comes in, is asking the question. I remember in this program I was sitting in a room in the United States, and there was a professor from, I think, Sloan University, and he was talking to a group of bankers, and he said, what you need to do is be aware enough to go to the real corners, real outside area of your expertise and look for the quiet, almost invisible symbols or ideas that are just floating around. Because one of those will be the new iPhone.
Right.
One of those will be the thing that really kills your old market and creates a new market. Look for those. And so I do that with coaching. What are those soft signals at the very peripheries of what we're doing or what we're discussing? What could it be as far as coaching is concerned? How do we make coaching more relevant?
If it is just, you don't need to know the ins and outs of the subject area of your client. It is really just working through a problem using logic to work out what they're missing and what really needs to be a focus and what's being addressed.
Oh, you might be giving to coaching way too much credit by using the word logic.
Oh no, I'm talking about what you bring. No?
I don't. I think speak to anyone who knows me, and regardless of the fact there are not many of those, none of them will say that I have ever spent any time grappling with the discipline of logic throughout my life. It's all intuitive.
Okay, so if it's intuitive, how do you prepare for a new client then? So let's say I'm a new client, you're meeting me tomorrow, you haven't heard that much about me. What do you do?
Depends on how senior you are. If you're very senior, I might do a search of press.
Yep.
If you've been in the AFR recently, and that's for no other reason but than saying, hey, Cliff, that was really great. I saw the article about you in the AFR last week. That at least shows them that you're interested. I don't do anything else. I don't do any other preparation. I take the person as they are.
Right.
And there are two elements, of course. What does the company want done with this person? And what does the person want done to themselves?
Right.
And so until you get to that, there's not much preparation. The preparation comes in trying to understand how to ask a question that literally disappears into the person's soul and they can't get rid of it. They're driving home or walking home and they think, I'd love to get rid of that bloody question that guy asked me, but it keeps coming back. I can't answer it. It keeps coming back. And quite often they get home to their partner and say to their partner, this coach person asked me this question, I can't get rid of it. And the partner will say, well, I've been telling you that for 30 years, which is really cool. But yeah, it's not about logic. It's not about how they think. I don't want to teach them how to think. I do want to teach them that their pursuit of truth is important. I do want to teach them that their challenge to the assumptions that they're basing their decisions on is important. And I do want to teach them that they've had their attention, that beautifully curious attention, stolen from them. And until they get it back, until they bring it back into their lives, they're going to go nowhere.
And has that always been your approach, or has that been a more recent kind of adaptation?
Look, it started off, I used to say to them, it's about deep thinking versus shallow thinking. Most executives deal with technical solutions to complex problems. So the first technical solution that hits their desk, they say, okay, that's great, we should be able to solve that problem, and off we go. And I always used to use the example of, I would say I've got a 5-year-old daughter, Georgina. What if I took her up to the local swimming pool, and because she wanted to go swimming, so I held her by the arms to toes in the water, and then I would run helter-skelter down the side of the pool with her toes in the water, and at the end say, did you enjoy your swim? Whereas what she wanted to do was really get in the water, and that's what executives weren't doing.
Right.
So it started off as that, but it's become more important as the complexity has increased, the areas of damage to owners, whether they be superannuation funds, shareholders, stakeholders, whoever, is getting more and more regular. And the reason for that is these highly paid people are just not thinking deeply enough. They're not challenging assumptions. And it's now come to this idea that I have finally landed upon is that we've just had attention stolen.
Yeah.
There's no attention anymore. Ask most people, they can't read for longer than 10 minutes anymore. They can't concentrate on things for more than 10 minutes. And of course, we scroll on everything. We wander along the highway looking at the mobile phones. We don't read anything. We don't curl up in a corner and bury ourselves in a problem. We don't sit with paper and pen and work it through.
We do encourage people to follow the Shift Socials channels, though. That doesn't count as doom scrolling. That's educational.
Yes, and more importantly, it's all about me. So
maybe a couple more questions here. What's one habit you think every executive needs to develop?
the habit of listening.
Yeah.
And listen with curiosity. Not listening for, how quickly can I get out of this conversation? Or I'll stop it as soon as the person says something that's right. It's listening with curiosity, listening for the thing you haven't heard before. Listen for the thing that surprises you. I'll give you an example. I was trying to get this through a bank executive, and he said that he was going up to Queensland. He was going to meet an extended team. He hadn't really met them before. And I said, well, just listen to them. Ask them about themselves and just listen. And he rang very proudly the next day and said, this young girl, I started talking to her, Peter, and he'd be really proud of me. And whenever a client says that, I know it's going to go wrong.
Mm.
He was listening to this girl, and he said, what do you do outside work? And she said, I have a charity. And she said, and it's just me. And I spend 3 or 4 nights every week going out and giving blankets and pillows and maybe some shoes and food to homeless musicians, derelict musicians. And he said, oh, wow, okay. Well, that's really interesting. Can the bank help you? Which is what I told him not to say. And she said, no, it's all fine, thank you. So he said to me, isn't that great, Peter? I found out about that. I said, there was one more question you should have asked her if curiosity had been let loose. And he said, what was the question? And I said, say to her, why musicians?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, oh, okay. So the next week he had to go back. So he found her. We probably scared the living daylights out of her seeing him come across the room. And he said, why musicians? And she said, because both my father and my 2 brothers died homeless, and they were all musicians.
Oh.
And they died on the streets.
Right.
And that's why I do it. Which closed it off.
Mm.
Which made the story. And she would have said, I wonder why he didn't ask why. He wasn't that interested. You have to go to the point where the person has told you the story. You don't have to do anything about it. You don't have to be a rescuer. You just say, thank you for sharing that story.
Just have an
That's
interest.
all you have to say.
Yeah.
You don't have to jump in and save them. So that's the thing about listening. The other one, if I can have 2, is, because this is the new one, is you have to pay attention. We've been told from the time we were born by mothers, fathers, orphan workers, people at school, people in your early jobs, you're not paying enough attention. Pay attention. And we don't pay attention so much anymore. Even with the listening, you could say it's about paying attention to the person.
Yes.
We're just not doing it. And I think this is the really dangerous part of where we are at the moment.
And that's a big topic, and one that we're going to spend a fair bit of time on in the near future,
Yes.
I think.
Yes, we certainly need to.
Is there a piece of coaching or a piece of advice that you used to give that you now no longer give because you don't believe in it?
Yes. When I first started out in coaching, there was a little bit of arrogance in this, but also a belief that you could tell an executive or a client that anyone could become a CEO.
Right.
You just have to develop some basic skills and you have to really want it. That's not true. I would never say that. Being a CEO is special. And in fact, the best quote I've ever had for it is that from a West Wing episode, and you know how much I love West Wing.
Yes.
When the two of the characters are arguing about someone who is running for president. And Toby, one of the characters, said, a man in that job shouldn't have to be presented with anything. It's for someone who grabs it and holds on to it, for someone who thinks the gods have conspired to bring him to this place. Now, I've often spoken to people about, before they take the role of a bank CEO, that this is the difference between them and everybody else. And you'll come to this place and you have a feeling that gods, or whoever you believe, have conspired. This is part of what you're meant to do because the job is so important.
All right. Well, I'll leave you with this question. If you were to have 3 hints or tips to anybody looking to get into executive coaching, what would those be?
Find a successful coach who's been around for about 20 years and spend some time with them. Ask them. Really check whether you're going to become a coach or all you're going to be doing is part trainer, part mentor. Secondly, see if you can have conversations with executives completely without mentioning any of what you've done in the past as an executive.
Right.
Because that's mentoring. And the third thing is, don't read any books on leadership that have numbers in the title. And don't read any books on leadership that have been written and published in the last 10 years.
Why is that?
Go back. Because the great books on leadership were written 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
Peter Drucker, people like that wrote the great books on leadership. Nothing has been published in the last 15 years that is going to tell you anything about leadership.
And when you're talking about numbers, you're saying books with titles like 7 Steps to Becoming the Best Executive Ever, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
5 steps to identifying dickheads in a crowd, that sort of thing.
All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there for today. Let's talk a bit about some leadership next time, leadership aspects.
Love to. You turn on the microphone and you know I'm happy to talk.